Now the NFL draft is done. I'm still doing a couple other videos pertaining to that in the next few days. I reached kind of this point now where I shift at least for the next 6 weeks, 7 weeks to pretend like I really give a crap about the NBA draft. And I do a little bit, right? It's a little interesting, but it's certainly not the same level of interesting as the NFL draft for a variety of different reasons. You know, the NFL draft is a better production. It covers multiple nights. And when it comes to the NFL draft, even for these guys coming out of college when they're maybe 20, 21 years old, they've typically played at least 2 or 3 years at a big time program in a lot of cases. So you have some type of connection to them or some type of familiarity with them. Whereas you look at the NBA now, and a lot of it becomes about 18, 19-year-olds and international players you maybe only ever seen in YouTube highlights and so forth. And the NBA draft is much more of a crapshoot. Like 1 year you'll have, a couple of studs taken at the top, and then the rest of the draft is mostly poopy. Then you have another year where it's a lot of really good players, but not very many great ones. And then you have years where the guys taken at the top are bust, and then guys in the middle, in the end of round one, end up being the superstars. So it's just much harder to project. So many of these guys, when you're talking about them, it is so much more about projection than it is the NFL draft. It just is. And then you just think about, like in a lot of cases, how NBA teams don't put the same type of priority and importance on the draft. They don't, right? It's in a lot of cases, it's not like you're looking at the draft and saying, hey, this team drafts this wing, this 3-and-D guy, this point guard, this big, and they're going to go from worst to first in a year. It's just not the way the NBA works, right? A lot of times it'll be, you'll draft a great player and you'll still suck dick that next season. Look at the Spurs. They took Victor Wembanyama. He was everything you could have hoped for as a rookie, averaging 21 points a game, double-digit rebounds, leads the league in blocks, rookie of the year. And yet the Spurs have like the 4th pick in the draft, right? It just doesn't work the same as it does in the NFL. And maybe part of it is because, like for this year, this draft class, at least at the top, looks like turds. And I'm trying to think of what it is, but I was thinking about this year's draft. I was comparing it to, like, if we said 25-ish years ago, or maybe I'll go back to like the 2001 draft, right? And you had Kwame Brown go 1, Tyson Chandler go 2, Paul Gasol go 3, Eddie Curry go 4, and I believe it was Jason Richardson went 5. Somebody fact check me on who the 5th pick was. I think it was Jay Rich. But you remember it was all about big men that year, right? And it was big men went 1, 2, 3, 4, and 3 of them were high schoolers. One of them was an international guy in Gasol. And I look at this year's draft and I said, man, if this draft took place back in 2001, how different it would look. Donovan Clingan would be pick number 1. Zaccharie would be pick number 2. Yves Missi would be pick number 3. And then the debate would start around pick number 4 and whether Alexandre Sarr from Perth, whether he's worth the 4th overall pick or not. Is he a new wave of center? Or is he going to not be able to hold up to the NBA game? Like, that's the type of shit we would be talking about, right? But it's a much different game now. And the way that the draft is viewed in terms of the types of players that are taken and where they're taken. Although you've got a couple of these more traditional bigs that could jump into the lottery this year for sure. Two of them will. But we just had the draft lottery. And, this probably wasn't the best year to win the lottery, but the Hawks pulled it off. Which feels so much better if you're a Bulls fan because you say, hey, the Bulls beating the Hawks in the play-in put the Hawks in a position where they could end up winning the number 1 overall pick in the lottery. Pain. That's balls! Eagles basketball. Sell the team, Jerry. Fire Acme. Got to contend for that play-in spot every year. But the Hawks win, even though they didn't have any fucking business doing it. None of this shit makes sense, right? Meanwhile, the Pistons got stuck up the keister with the 5th pick. How the hell does that happen? Even the league says, we don't give a shit about you, Detroit. So now Atlanta's sitting there with kind of a gift and a surprise, right? A pick they didn't expect to have, but they ultimately got. They got the number 1 overall pick, and what are they going to do with it? It seems like right now, Alexandre Sarr will be the top pick, I guess, right? If you're the Hawks, would they explore potentially trading this pick? But even if you did try to trade this pick, who are you going to trade for? How's that going to work? And you probably need to be thinking about whether you should be moving on from Trae Young. I don't know. But if you're like Atlanta, this is the wrong fucking year to luck into the lottery. I mean, of course, nothing was going to stop San Antonio getting that top pick last year. There was nothing on David Stern's grave that was going to stop that from happening. Oh, but the lottery's legit. Yeah. The Cavs just happened to win it the year LeBron was available. The Bulls just happened to win it when their odds suggested they shouldn't have the year that Derrick Rose was available. Patrick Ewing in the Knicks in 2005. Dwight Howard in the Magic in 2004. I mean, at this point, come on. When you got that many fucking coincidences, you know the lottery is bullshit. Just be honest about it, folks. It's a fucking work. And if you think it's 100% legit shoot, like how stupid can you be? Well, they got Deloitte or whoever the fuck, and they're the ones that make sure that it's on the up and up, just like Arthur Anderson used to do for Enron, right? Whatever. So the Hawks win the lottery in the wrong year to win the lottery. And I guess right now they're going to take Sarr, which leaves the Wizards at the 2nd pick. They got up in there. And what will they do? That's another scrub-ass organization that needs a lot of help. They need something. I don't know they're going to get it in this draft. Nikola, I'll admit, watching him so far, I don't think he's a top 5 pick. But I haven't watched a lot yet. So I'll come back in a few weeks and I might say, hey, I need to own up. I'm wrong about this guy. But right now, I don't see it. Like, personally, I could understand why in this draft somebody would take Sarr at number 1. But Risacher, I've got him going 3rd to Houston. Like, to me, it feels like he's got more upside, certainly than Topic and probably than Sarr. As far as Houston goes, like, this is an interesting spot. It's a team that finished around 500, right? They got the 3rd pick. Like, are they going to try and trade this and get a veteran, and are they going to try and go after it? Or are they going to sit there and wait another year and get themselves another young talent? And that's a thing, right? It's kind of like that hell the Clippers used to be under Elgin Baylor for so many years. It's great to get all these lottery picks, but at some point in time, you got to do something with them, right? And all you end up doing every 4 to 5 years is just drafting the same types of players in the same types of positions, and you never make any progress. So we'll see what Houston does. You certainly can in Houston make an argument that those are teams that might look to trade out of the spots, but then who's going to want to trade, and how much value do the 1st and 3rd pick in this year's draft actually have? Who is sitting pretty good right now, though, has to be the Spurs. They're sitting with the 4th pick and the 8th pick. And to me, I just looked at them like, okay, who are Popovich Spurs type of players? Who would play well alongside Wembanyama? And I thought Buzelis did, especially if Risacher is not there. And then Dalton Knecht at 8, like, feels like a Craig Popovich guy in so many ways. He's tall, white, and can shoot. That checks a lot of boxes in the Popovich book, I'm just saying. But if you think about it, that's what you got to do, right? You got to build around Wembanyama. And it's not to say that Buzelis or Knecht are going to end up being stars in the league. Like, this top 10 feels like it's full of maybe 1 or 2 guys that have some star potential, but a lot of guys that are going to be more like solid to damn good role players or like good starters. This almost feels like a draft that you're better off having like pick 10 through 20 than you are having a pick 1 through 9. So I don't know that the difference is that great. Like, I look at Chicago, I've got them mocked to take Yves Missi at pick 11. Like, do I feel that he's such a huge step down from an NBA projection to Clingan? No. Do I think Missi at that point at 11 represents a better talent than a couple other guys that'd be taken ahead of him? Yeah. But do I sit there and think that Missi in any way changes anything? No. He'd just come and play under Billy Donovan and he wouldn't get shit dick for minutes and they'd waste a year of his development as a rookie. That's what would happen, right? Like there are lots of these guys, especially, and maybe again, to be fair, right? The reason this draft has some of this kind of perception of being kind of weak and soft and frankly ass is because of the number of international guys at the top and there's some like American bias there, yada, yada, yada. Or maybe it's just the fact that this draft is kind of ass. And I think that's because it's kind of ass. I would not feel ecstatic if I got a top 5 lottery pick in this draft. Because I'd be staring down the barrel very likely of taking a guy that might be more in like the 10 to 15 point per game range in his career. Versus if I took one of these guys maybe at like pick 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, I feel a lot better if those guys average 13, 14, 15 a game in their career, right? Now, the good thing is, if you talk about this draft, you just want to automatically say it's ass, even though I agree it kind of is that you could look at it and say, well, the NBA is kind of soft and it's easy and it's ass now by comparison. It doesn't take shit for a guy to average 10 points a game anymore because it doesn't, right? So fucking easy to score in today's NBA. Nobody playing defense consistently, yada, yada, yada. So even though the draft looks weaker, the league is also weaker. So in relation, maybe this draft isn't so weak after all. Maybe it's not. I promise you, you'll have a couple of real studs come out of this draft. I just don't know that there's one real superstar or franchise changer. And maybe in part because there's not a Wembanyama type talent in this year's class. It just naturally feels weaker. But last year's draft was pretty good. It was strong at the top and it had a lot of depth. And you could feel it and you could sense it, right? You've got none of those vibes or feelings so far with this year's draft. So you can take a look at my mock. I've got picks 1 through 14 at least right now in the description box. I'll probably come back once a week as I'm catching up on some of these players and watching them more with updated mock drafts that at least cover the full round 1. But yeah, I don't expect this to be a great draft class, that's for sure.